All right, we have reached the last video of Unit 6. This is on the American frontier, Section 9. I want to start with the question of how was settlement in the West encouraged? Now, we talked about this last unit, and there were three big pieces that pushed us towards the West. The first is going to be the Homestead Act. Remember, that act that said you can have 160 acres of land scot-free if you just move out here and work it for 5 years. The second is going to be the California Gold Rush, people thinking they can get rich quick. And the third is going to be the Transcontinental Railroad, giving people a faster, more efficient way of transporting to the West, connecting the nation. Now keep those in mind because that is what built the American frontier, pushed us out there into this land of unknown. So reasons for settlement: mining of metals, the first boom in the West. So with this, you're going to see boom towns, gold and silver. This idea that you could find gold and silver if you just moved out west reignited that idea of manifest destiny. As the mining industry is going to grow, this is going to push us to the idea that that land belongs to us, sea to shining sea. Mining towns are going to spread with the hopes of finding riches quickly. People are going to have to live somewhere. They're going to have to congregate somewhere. So you would see boom towns where people would live for a period of time. And if nothing was found there, they would abandon those towns and move somewhere else, spreading quickly across the frontier. As we're seeing this industry grow, though, the need for a railway to connect the East with the West is also going to grow. Congress is going to support the growth of the Transcontinental Railroad by providing money in the form of loans and land grants to the two companies that competed to build the Transcontinental Railroad, the Union Pacific and the Central Pacific. These railroads are going to aid in the growth of cities and towns and intensify the demand for land, Indian land. And it's going to bring white settlers into Mexican American communities in the Southwest. We're also going to see the requirement for statehood, which was that population of 60,000, be met in territories, in 10 territories between 1864 and 1896. So making those territories into states rather quickly. Other reasons for settlement: the job market out there. Cattle ranching aided in the Western boom because the West is going to be home to vast acres of grass that could be used for feeding the herds of cattle. So people see this as a place where they can go and be successful. The Transcontinental Railroad makes cattle ranching successful because meat could be moved to eastern markets easier, more efficiently. The culture of the cowboy is going to come out during this time. It originates from the Mexican vaqueros who had learned to train horses and work with cattle. That spurs the wild west storyline. The Great Plains is the last part of the country that was settled by farmers looking for a better life, and those farmers are going to be drawn in by the Homestead Act. These farmers are going to be people from all over the already existing United States, which at this time included former slaves. Former slaves that moved to the Great Plains in places like Kansas and Oklahoma are given the name exodusters, moving out to take the skills that they had learned on the plantations and apply them to this new place. We are going to see that all of these different modes that push people out there, the cattle ranching, the mining towns, the openness of the Great Plains for the cowboy, the looking for a better life, the exodusters, This is going to create a very diverse group of people moving out for a wide variety of reasons, and it's going to cause problems as we move to the west. So, what were the problems on the plains? First, farmers have to be inventive to survive. This is not the South where you have a long growing season, lush land that they know how to grow on. So you have to adapt to where you're at. They're going to use sod bricks to build houses instead of wood. That's what you see in the pictures there. So it's going to kind of be a mix of like the clay ground because that's what was available. You're going to see the invention of barbed wire. When you are giving people 160 acres of land, there has to be a way to separate it out. The plains are so vast, there's so many people out there claiming land, moving through the territory. There had to be a way to mark it. There had to be a cheap way to mark what was yours and what was not. And you have to figure out a way to keep the animals that you have as far as cattle from moving too far. So barbed wire is going to be used to fence the land very cheaply and hopefully effectively to separate out what's theirs, what's mine, what's yours, what's ours. We are also going to see farmers develop dry farming techniques. They're going to use windmills to tap underground water. They're going to use the plow to tackle the sod covered land. This land is very different. It doesn't rain as much out there, so you have to be innovative in how you water the land. You can't, the soil is very hard, it's very tough to work, so you have to use different tools, different techniques to keep the land from being stripped of all of its nutrients. So being very innovative and inventive to be successful. Blizzards and droughts are going to strike this land between the 1880s and 1890s, which is going to drive some farmers back east. But those that remained became more commercial and dependent on scientific farming methods to be successful in this new plain, this new territory. From the 1950s onward, the West is going to become the area of the nation that is the most diverse in population. We have Asian, Mexican, Mexican American, Native American already existing in this territory and coexisting with all of these different backgrounds. The various reasons for settling, mining, ranching, sheep herding, farming, all of this is going to compete with each other for land, for opportunity out in the West, which creates this very unique culture, because the frontier is going to be this place, this land of opportunity, where if you think back, the land of opportunity used to be the East Coast. Think back to the colonies, okay, when immigrants first came here. Once we settled, became successful, we started to spread out. And as we spread out, as we acquired more land, the same promise went with that new territory. And the American frontier was the last opportunity to really start over, start anew, achieve the American dream, be the controller of your destiny. This land was so unknown, so unsettled, except for Native Americans, that it offered so much possibility. And Americans are going to move out there for many different reasons, and they're going to compete not only with each other, but Native Americans, immigrants, to achieve that dream. So it will bring up competition, it will bring up violence, because many of these places that they were moving to weren't states. They don't have government structures. They don't have intricate local government structures, which is your police force and things like that. So there is a lot of crime, a lot of killing and things like that. So the story of the West isn't that far off from what was actually happening. But it's because until more people moved out there and more tax money was collected, which could fuel a police force, which could keep law and order, you're going to see a lot of freedom, which can be good and it can be bad. So the problems on the plains weren't just with the land and being successful, it was also with each other. And that diversity, while it was great, it also created some conflict. So when we look at the American frontier, we cannot ignore what was happening as we moved out there. And there's going to be more criticism of Indian policy as we expand into the West, because that's again who we're running into. We've pushed the Native Americans out west for years now, and again we're trying to do the same thing. The reservation policy was a huge failure. This policy was not only costly in economic terms, but the Native Americans did not go willingly because, again, we were moving them within 30 years of the first time we pushed them out west. We were telling them they had to move again. So there's going to be much conflict with the Native Americans to be forced onto the reservations, which creates a failure in this policy. Policymakers had hopes that the buffalo would become extinct as white settlers moved out there and hunted the buffalo to near extinction. And if the buffalo became extinct, then Indians would have no other option than to turn to farming. And farming was the great American pastime. And if they became farmers, then they would fully assimilate into American life, because farming would magically make them forget about their culture, about their background, and they would just become American. But that didn't really work either. So again, we continue to see this conflict between settlers moving out, moving westward, and confiscating Indian land and pushing yet again. The mistreatment of Native Americans by the government is going to be acknowledged in a book that was written by Helen Hunt. And I need you to put this in your brain, lock it away for later. Helen Hunt is going to write A Century of Dishonor to speak out against the treatment of Native Americans. A century stands for 100 years. So she's going to say 100 years the government has been mistreating Native Americans, and she's going to document each and every piece of the ways that Native Americans have been dishonored every step of the way that the United States has been building. Because the United States building goes hand in hand with taking from the Native Americans. From the establishment of the colonies all the way up to the present that she is writing within, the Native Americans have been pushed off their territory, they have been discounted as a group of people, and they have been undermined by the government, who has failed to protect them, even knowing they were supposed to be their ally, their confidant, their protector. This book is going to turn heads towards the mistreatment of Native Americans. Does that stop the mistreatment? No. Does it draw attention to it? Yes. It includes all of the wars, the battles fought against the Native Americans, the breaking up of the natives from their land, the trying to tear down the tribes of Native Americans, the disrespect from the government, the breaking of treaties. The list goes on and on and on. But this book documented each and every piece to be laid out so that someone would pay attention to what has been happening. So while we have this frontier, the American frontier that we are spreading into, we have to keep in mind that there were already people there, as there has always been. And while we see the West grow and connect and manifest destiny be achieved, we can't discount that we did it and there was a cost to Native Americans along the way. Now that is the end of Unit 6. Be looking for your review video that's coming up. and that will be the final video for Unit 6 leading into your test. And make sure that you submit your homework for tonight.